They laughed because they thought the woman crying over a shot of cheap tequila didn't belong in a place where powerful men bought silence with stacks of cash. But before the night was over, every single person inside the Cobalt Lounge would wish they had never looked at her that way. At exactly 2:15 a.m., the music inside Manhattan's exclusive Cobalt Lounge drowned out almost every conversation except the quiet sound of a woman trying not to cry. Isabella Moreno lifted a tiny glass of tequila with trembling fingers, forcing herself to swallow before another tear escaped. She hated crying in public, but after everything that had happened during the past 24 hours, pretending to be strong had become impossible. The bartender looked away, giving her the small kindness of privacy, while a group of elegantly dressed women whispered behind their cocktails, smiling just enough for Isabella to know she was the subject of their conversation. She had heard those smiles before, too big, too loud, too ordinary, too soft for a city that rewarded perfection. Isabella was 32 years old, proudly curvy, and worked as a pastry chef in a neighborhood bakery that had just closed after the owner declared bankruptcy. Months of unpaid overtime disappeared overnight. So did her health insurance, her apartment security, and nearly every dollar she had managed to save while helping pay for her mother's medical treatments. Earlier that evening, her boyfriend of 3 years had told her he couldn't build a future with someone who always carried problems. 10 minutes later, he walked away holding another woman's hand, leaving Isabella standing alone in the rain outside the subway station. She had not come to Cobalt Lounge searching for attention. She simply wanted one quiet drink before figuring out where life could possibly go next. Unfortunately, expensive places often attracted people who measured human worth by appearance instead of character. A man wearing a designer jacket glanced toward her table and laughed loudly enough for others to hear. Someone must have mistaken this place for an all-you-can-eat buffet. His friends burst into laughter. Isabella closed her eyes for a second, gripping the edge of the marble counter. She had promised herself she would not react. She would finish her drink, pay her bill, and disappear without giving strangers another reason to stare. What she didn't know was that someone else had already noticed everything. In the private VIP section overlooking the main floor, Dante Bellucci sat alone at table 7. His white dress shirt contrasted sharply against the dark room, while 2 trusted security men remained several feet behind him without speaking. Few people inside the lounge knew his real business, but everyone recognized the effect of his presence. Conversations lowered whenever he entered a room. Club owners greeted him personally. Politicians answered his phone calls. Criminal organizations feared his decisions. Dante ruled an empire built on discipline, intelligence, and absolute loyalty. Years earlier, betrayal inside his own family had taught him that emotions were expensive weaknesses. Since then, he trusted facts more than promises and silence more than affection. He rarely noticed strangers unless they represented either a threat or an opportunity. Yet, the woman sitting alone near the bar refused to leave his attention. She never begged for sympathy. She never argued with the people mocking her. Instead, she quietly reached into her purse, counted a few wrinkled dollar bills, and made sure the bartender received a proper tip despite how little money she obviously had left. Dante watched the bartender hesitate before accepting it. That single moment interested him far more than beauty ever could. Wealth revealed character, but poverty often revealed it even more clearly. One of his security men leaned closer. "Boss, should I ask management to remove the people bothering her?" Dante never answered immediately. His eyes remained fixed on Isabella as she wiped away another tear before anyone could see. There was dignity in the way she refused to surrender her kindness even after the world had taken almost everything else. For reasons he could not explain, that quiet strength felt strangely familiar. Before he could respond, the laughing man stood, grabbed Isabella's purse from the empty chair beside her, and waved it high above his head while his friends cheered. Isabella rose to her feet, embarrassed but determined, asking him calmly to give it back. The room filled with uncomfortable laughter, waiting to see another cruel joke unfold. Dante slowly placed his whiskey glass on the table, his expression turning cold enough to silence even his own bodyguards. Then he stood. The laughter vanished so quickly that even the music suddenly felt distant. Dante Bellucci descended from the VIP section with the unhurried confidence of a man who had never needed to raise his voice to control a room. Every step across the polished floor carried the weight of reputation, and one by one, conversations died before he even reached the bar. The man holding Isabella's purse smirked at first, assuming another wealthy customer wanted entertainment. That confidence evaporated the instant he recognized the face approaching him. His smile collapsed. His friends instinctively stepped backward. Even the bartender straightened his posture. Dante stopped less than 3 feet away, his dark eyes fixed on the purse dangling carelessly from the man's hand. "Give it back," he said quietly. There was no anger in his voice, only certainty. The man forced an awkward laugh. "Relax, we're just having a little fun." Dante tilted his head slightly, almost studying him. She isn't laughing. Silence swallowed the room. Without another word, the man hurriedly handed the purse back to Isabella, avoiding eye contact entirely. Dante accepted it instead, brushed an invisible speck of dust from the worn leather, and turned toward Isabella with unexpected care. "I believe this belongs to you." She hesitated before taking it, surprised that someone who looked powerful enough to own the building would notice something as ordinary as an inexpensive handbag. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome." Their eyes met for only a moment, yet something about hers unsettled him. Most people looked at Dante with fear, greed, or admiration. Isabella looked exhausted. There was no calculation behind her expression, only someone trying to survive another impossible day. Before either of them could speak again, the man who had mocked her muttered under his breath, hoping to recover what little pride he had left. "She's still not worth all this attention." Dante heard every word. So did everyone else. He slowly turned back toward the group. "Do you know what separates a strong man from a weak one?" No one answered. A weak man humiliates someone who can't benefit him. A strong man never needs to. The words landed harder than any threat. The club owner rushed over almost immediately, his face pale. "Mr. Bellucci, I'm terribly sorry. This should never have happened." Dante didn't even look at him. "Then make sure it never happens again." Security staff appeared within seconds and escorted the group toward the exit without resistance. None of them protested. None of them dared. As the doors closed behind them, conversation slowly returned, though every voice remained noticeably quieter than before. Isabella stared at the marble countertop, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. She had spent most of her life trying not to stand out, yet now an entire room seemed aware of her existence because one stranger had decided she deserved respect. "I didn't need anyone to rescue me," she said softly after a long pause. Dante almost smiled. "Almost." "No," he replied. "You needed someone to stop rewarding cruelty." The answer caught her off guard. She expected arrogance, perhaps even flirtation, but found neither. Instead, there was something restrained beneath his composed exterior, as though kindness was a language he rarely allowed himself to speak. The bartender quietly placed a fresh glass of water beside Isabella instead of another tequila shot. She reached for her wallet. Dante gently slid a $100 bill across the counter before she could remove a single dollar. Isabella immediately pushed it back toward him. "I appreciate what you did, but I can't let you pay for me." That response surprised him even more than her refusal to argue earlier. Most people who recognized his wealth searched for opportunities to benefit from it. She rejected the easiest one without hesitation. "It's only water," she said with a faint, tired smile. "I can still afford water." For the first time that evening, Dante allowed the corner of his mouth to lift ever so slightly. His bodyguards exchanged quick glances. Neither had seen that expression in months. "Then allow me to replace the drink that wasn't worth your tears," he answered. Isabella looked directly into his eyes. "The tequila wasn't why I was crying." That single sentence lingered between them. Dante didn't ask what had happened. Years of reading people had taught him that real pain revealed itself when it was ready, not when questioned. Instead, he pulled out the chair across from her. "May I sit?" She studied him cautiously. Everything about this man suggested influence, discipline, and hidden danger, yet he had asked permission instead of assuming it. "If you want." He sat, maintaining a respectful distance. Around them, curious patrons pretended not to watch while secretly observing every second. Nobody could remember the last time Dante Bellucci had shared a table with anyone outside his inner circle, especially a woman no one recognized. Before either of them could continue the conversation, one of Dante's security men approached with unusual urgency. He leaned close enough that only Dante could hear. "Boss, we have a problem. One of our warehouses was hit 20 minutes ago. Someone left a message. They mentioned a woman." Dante's expression hardened instantly. "What message?" The bodyguard lowered his voice even further. "They said if you choose the wrong woman tonight, your empire will be next." The warmth that had quietly settled between Dante and Isabella disappeared the instant those words reached his ears. His expression remained controlled, but the subtle change in his posture told his security team everything they needed to know. Someone had crossed a line. Isabella noticed it immediately. Moments earlier, the man across from her had seemed unexpectedly approachable. Now his eyes carried the distant focus of someone calculating danger several moves ahead. "Is everything all right?" she asked carefully. Dante looked back at her, deliberately softening his voice. "A business issue." It was technically true, though the message disturbed him far more than he allowed anyone to see. Very few people knew where his warehouses were located. Even fewer would dare connect an attack to a woman he had spoken with for less than 5 minutes. Whoever orchestrated this was not acting on impulse. They had been watching. Marco, his senior bodyguard, waited silently beside the table until Dante gave a nearly invisible nod. "Secure every exit," Dante instructed. "Nobody leaves until we know who came in with that group." Marco disappeared without another question. Around the lounge, additional security personnel quietly repositioned themselves, blending into the crowd so naturally that most guests never realized the room had just become a controlled perimeter. Isabella sensed the shift anyway. Years of working double shifts in crowded kitchens had taught her to notice changes in atmosphere before anyone spoke. "Did something happen because of me?" she asked. Dante answered without hesitation. "No." He paused briefly before adding, "But I intend to make sure nothing does." She frowned slightly. "You don't even know me. That doesn't change what happened." Before she could respond, the bartender leaned toward Isabella with a folded receipt someone had left behind. "Miss, I think this belongs to you." Confused, she unfolded the paper. Her face lost color almost instantly. Written across the blank side in thick black marker were 7 simple words. "Stop talking to him if you want tomorrow." There was no signature, no explanation. Just the sentence. Dante gently took the receipt from her hand, reading it once before passing it to Marco, who had silently returned. Fingerprints. Cameras. Everyone who entered this section during the last 15 minutes. Marco nodded and disappeared again. Isabella struggled to steady her breathing. "I don't understand. I've never been here before." Dante believed her. Fear was easy to fake. Confusion like this was not. "Do you have any enemies?" She almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. "I bake birthday cakes for children and wedding desserts for couples who usually complain they're too pretty to eat. The closest thing I have to an enemy is a customer who wanted a refund because her golden retriever knocked over a cheesecake." For reasons he could not explain, Dante found the answer strangely reassuring. She wasn't hiding a double life. She truly was an ordinary woman whose worst day had somehow collided with his dangerous world. Yet that made the situation even more troubling. If she wasn't the target, then someone wanted him to believe she was. Across the room, one of Dante's men signaled discreetly toward the entrance. Security footage from the lobby had already been reviewed. The men who had mocked Isabella had arrived separately. They had never spoken to each other until inside the lounge. Dante's instincts sharpened. It had been staged. The humiliation, the stolen purse, even the timing. Someone had intentionally created a situation that forced him to make a choice. Isabella watched him thinking, "You're not telling me everything." He met her eyes again. "No." She appreciated the honesty more than another comforting lie. "Am I in danger?" Dante considered the question carefully. The truthful answer carried consequences either way. If this is connected to me, then possibly. Isabella closed her eyes for a second. She had entered the lounge believing unemployment and heartbreak were the worst things life could offer. Now strangers were leaving anonymous threats because a powerful man had returned her purse. "I should leave," she whispered. "That would be exactly what whoever planned this expects." She looked at him, searching for arrogance, manipulation, or hidden motives. Instead, she found concern that seemed almost reluctant, as though protecting people had become instinct, even when he wished it hadn't. Before either of them could say another word, a woman in an elegant silver evening gown approached their table with measured confidence. Every eye in the lounge followed her. Tall, poised, and effortlessly glamorous, she rested one manicured hand on Dante's shoulder as though she belonged there. "There you are," she said smoothly before looking toward Isabella with a polite smile that never reached her eyes. "I was beginning to think you had forgotten we were announcing our engagement tonight." Isabella froze. Dante's expression did not change, but Marco's hand immediately drifted toward the inside of his jacket. The room fell silent once again. Isabella slowly looked from the stunning woman to Dante, her heart sinking as one painful thought echoed through her mind. Of course, a man like him already belonged to someone. What she did not know was that the woman standing beside Dante had just spoken the first lie in a much larger conspiracy. Isabella instinctively pushed back her chair, her pulse racing as embarrassment replaced confusion. She had no desire to become the reason for another woman's public humiliation, especially after everything that had already happened that night. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, reaching for her purse. "I didn't realize." Before she could stand, Dante spoke without looking away from the elegant woman beside him. "You misunderstood the invitation, Victoria." His calm tone carried enough authority to stop everyone within earshot from breathing for a second. Victoria's practiced smile remained perfectly in place, but a flicker of irritation crossed her eyes. "Did I?" she asked sweetly. "Your family has been discussing this arrangement for months." "Discussing," Dante corrected, "not agreeing." The distinction landed like a stone in still water. Around the lounge, whispers spread through the crowd. Isabella looked between them, sensing she had unknowingly stepped into a conversation that had begun long before she entered the building. Victoria slowly removed her hand from Dante's shoulder, maintaining flawless composure despite the public rejection. "Perhaps this isn't the best place." "No," Dante replied. "It's the perfect place. There shouldn't be any misunderstanding." Isabella lowered her eyes, wishing she could disappear. The last thing she wanted was to become part of a powerful family's private conflict. "Mr. Bellucci," she said softly, "whatever this is, I don't want to make it worse." Dante finally turned toward her. "You didn't." His answer came without hesitation. "Someone else did." Victoria followed his gaze, studying Isabella more carefully now. Instead of seeing a glamorous rival, she found an exhausted woman with tear-stained eyes, a worn sweater slipping off one shoulder, and a handbag whose leather had faded from years of use. For a brief moment, genuine confusion replaced Victoria's polished confidence. This was the woman capable of distracting Dante? It made no sense, unless the distraction itself had never been the objective. Marco returned carrying a tablet displaying security footage from the entrance. He placed it in front of Dante without speaking. The recording showed Isabella arriving alone at 2:03 a.m., paying her own cover charge and walking directly to the bar. 12 minutes later, the men who mocked her entered separately, exchanging subtle signals almost too small to notice. Another camera angle revealed something even more disturbing. Victoria herself had arrived only 3 minutes after the staged confrontation began. Dante replayed the footage twice before locking eyes with Marco. She knew exactly when to walk in. Marco nodded once. Within 30 seconds. Victoria noticed the screen but remained outwardly calm. "You're investigating surveillance footage instead of introducing your guest?" Dante stood slowly, his chair sliding backward across the polished floor. Interesting choice of words. She folded her arms. "Meaning?" "You called Isabella my guest." Victoria's expression barely shifted. "Isn't she?" You had never seen her before tonight. Silence settled again. Dante stepped closer, never raising his voice. "So tell me, Victoria, how did you know she wasn't here because someone invited her?" For the first time that evening, Victoria hesitated. It lasted less than a second, but Dante caught it. So did Marco. Isabella watched the exchange without understanding the hidden battle unfolding in front of her. She simply wanted the tension to end. "Please," she whispered. "If this misunderstanding is because of me, I'll leave." Dante turned immediately. "No." The firmness in his voice surprised even him. "Leaving won't protect you now." Before Isabella could ask what he meant, every light inside the lounge suddenly went dark. Gasps echoed through the room as the music stopped. Emergency lighting flickered on seconds later, bathing the club in a cold blue glow. Marco's hand moved instantly to shield Dante's right side, while two other security men formed a protective line. Dante did something none of them expected. Instead of stepping behind his security team, he moved directly in front of Isabella. His body naturally blocked her from the crowded room. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. She stared at him, confused. Why? Because whoever cut the power wanted chaos. The emergency generator restored electricity almost immediately, but something had changed. The crystal glass that had been sitting in front of Dante was gone. Marco scanned the table before spotting it several feet away, near another chair. A bartender hurried over, carrying it with a napkin. "Sir, I think someone switched your drink during the blackout." Dante accepted the glass without touching the rim. The amber liquid looked identical to his untouched whiskey from moments earlier. Marco's expression darkened. "Don't drink it." One of Dante's security specialists removed a portable testing strip from his jacket, dipping it into the liquid. Within seconds, the strip changed color. The result was unmistakable. The drink had been contaminated with a fast-acting poison. Isabella covered her mouth in shock as the realization spread across the room. The attack had not been aimed at her after all. She had merely been the distraction that brought Dante Bellucci out of the safety of his private table and into the perfect position for someone to try to kill him. For one suspended heartbeat, nobody moved. The music had stopped, the conversations had evaporated, and every pair of eyes inside Cobalt Lounge remained fixed on the small testing strip in Marco's hand. The deep crimson color spreading across it confirmed what Dante already suspected. Someone had planned this night with terrifying precision. The staged humiliation, the anonymous threat, Victoria's perfectly timed appearance, the blackout, none of it had been random. It had all been designed to place him exactly where a poisoned drink could reach him. Marco immediately signaled the rest of the security team. "Lock every entrance. Nobody leaves." Heavy security doors slid shut with a metallic thud, and armed guards positioned themselves throughout the lounge before panic could spread. Several guests protested, but the sight of Dante standing perfectly calm silenced them almost as quickly as his reputation had. Isabella instinctively stepped closer to him without realizing it. She hated how frightened she felt, yet somehow standing near him made the chaos seem farther away. Dante noticed the movement but said nothing. Instead, he quietly removed his tailored suit jacket and draped it across her shoulders. "You're shaking," he said. Isabella looked down at the expensive fabric resting over her sweater. "You need this more than I do." "No," he answered. "Right now, I need you to stay warm and stay where I can see you." The simple statement carried no romance, no dramatic declaration, only quiet determination. Yet hearing those words caused something unfamiliar to settle inside Isabella's heart. No one had protected her dignity before asking anything in return. Across the room, Victoria folded her arms, watching the exchange with carefully hidden frustration. "How touching," she remarked coolly. "Perhaps we're forgetting that someone just tried to kill you." Dante turned toward her. "I'm forgetting nothing." His eyes shifted briefly toward Marco. That tiny glance was enough. Within seconds, another member of his security detail approached carrying a small wireless earpiece recovered from beneath one of the banquet tables during the lockdown. "Boss," the agent reported, "we found this taped under table 11. Marco examined it. "Communication equipment." Dante nodded slowly. "Meaning someone inside this room has been receiving instructions." Victoria's composure remained flawless, but Isabella noticed one detail no one else seemed to catch. The elegant woman's right hand had tightened just enough for the knuckles to pale beneath her diamond bracelet. It reminded Isabella of nervous customers waiting to hear whether an expensive wedding cake had survived delivery. The smallest physical habits often revealed the biggest emotions. She leaned slightly toward Dante and spoke almost in a whisper. "She's scared." Dante glanced at Isabella. How do you know? She hasn't stopped smiling. He looked back at Victoria with fresh attention. Isabella was right. The smile hadn't changed once since the poisoning had been discovered. It wasn't confidence. It was control. Someone desperately trying not to reveal panic. Before Dante could respond, Marco's phone vibrated. He answered briefly, then looked toward his employer. Our cyber team accessed the security server. Dante waited. The cameras didn't fail during the blackout. Marco turned the phone so Dante could see the live recording. While the room had gone dark, the backup infrared cameras had continued recording every movement. The footage clearly showed a server carrying drinks colliding with another employee near Dante's table. During the confusion, a gloved hand reached from behind a decorative column, exchanged one whiskey glass for another, and disappeared. More importantly, a second figure, standing only a few feet away, gave a subtle, approving nod before the swap happened. That second figure was not Victoria. It was the club's general manager, the very man who had apologized earlier and promised such behavior would never happen again. Dante's expression hardened. Bring him to me. Security officers rushed toward the manager's office, but moments later one of them shouted from across the lounge. He's gone! Marco cursed quietly. There's a service exit behind the wine cellar. Dante immediately understood. The manager had never been the mastermind. He had simply expected the poison to succeed before anyone thought to review backup footage. Isabella suddenly remembered something. The receipt. Dante looked at her. What about it? The bartender didn't hand it to me directly. She closed her eyes, replaying the moment in her mind. The manager picked it up first. He said someone had dropped it, looked at it for a second, then gave it to the bartender. Marco stared at her. You're sure? Yes. Dante finally saw the entire pattern. The threatening message had not been a warning for Isabella. It had been bait for him. Whoever planned the attack wanted him emotionally invested just long enough to ignore the real danger sitting inches away on the table. His phone suddenly vibrated. An encrypted message appeared on the screen from an unknown sender. One sentence filled the display. You chose compassion over caution. That almost destroyed you. Dante looked at Isabella standing quietly beside him with his jacket wrapped around her shoulders. Then he calmly locked the phone and slipped it back into his pocket. No, he said, loud enough for Marco to hear. Compassion exposed the trap. He turned toward the remaining guests, his voice carrying through the silent lounge. Tonight ends differently than my enemies planned. They wanted me isolated. Instead, they revealed themselves. At that exact moment, a single gunshot echoed from somewhere outside the locked building, followed immediately by the screech of tires disappearing into the Manhattan night. The echo of the gunshot lingered only for a moment before Marco's radio crackled with new reports from the perimeter team. No casualties. The shooter fired into the air to create a diversion. The vehicle is already heading toward the bridge. Dante didn't move. He understood the message behind the escape. His enemies were not celebrating failure. They were promising another encounter. He calmly turned to Marco. Increase protection at every warehouse. Freeze tomorrow's meetings. I want every employee who worked here tonight interviewed before sunrise. Marco nodded once. Understood, boss. The remaining guests were escorted out in an orderly manner after their identities were verified. Within minutes, the once crowded lounge had become almost silent. Broken glass reflected the soft lights overhead while employees quietly cleaned the floor, trying to erase the evidence of a night no one would soon forget. Isabella stood near the bar with Dante's jacket still wrapped around her shoulders. She carefully removed it and held it out to him. Thank you. Dante looked at the jacket but made no effort to take it. Keep it until you get home. She shook her head with a faint smile. I think you've already done more than enough for someone you met 2 hours ago. Maybe. He accepted the jacket this time, folding it neatly over his arm. But I don't think our meeting was an accident. Isabella looked at him curiously. You really believe someone planned all of this? I know they did. She lowered her eyes. I'm sorry your kindness put you in danger. Dante answered immediately. My kindness didn't. He paused before continuing. Their hatred did. Those simple words settled deep inside Isabella's heart. For years she had quietly accepted blame for things beyond her control. believing that if people mocked her, rejected her, or overlooked her, perhaps she simply wasn't enough. Tonight, for the first time in a very long time, someone powerful had reminded her that cruelty always belonged to the person choosing it, never the person receiving it. The bartender approached, carrying a small paper bag. "Miss Moreno," he said with a warm smile. "Our pastry chef quit this afternoon. If you're looking for work, the owner asked me to give you his card. He heard what happened tonight and said anyone who keeps their dignity under pressure deserves an interview." Isabella blinked in surprise as she accepted the business card. "Thank you." After the bartender walked away, she laughed softly for the first time that evening. "I came here thinking I had lost everything." Dante studied her expression. The sadness was still there, but it no longer carried the same weight. Hope had quietly found its way back. "Sometimes the worst night changes the direction of the rest of your life." She smiled. "Is that experience talking?" A rare warmth reached Dante's eyes. Maybe. Before leaving, he reached into his pocket and handed her a simple black business card with nothing except a phone number embossed in silver. "If anyone contacts you because of tonight, call me immediately." Isabella looked at the card. "No title? You already know my name." She slipped it carefully into her purse. "I hope I never have to use it." "So do I." A black SUV pulled up outside the entrance as dawn began to soften the New York skyline. Marco opened the rear passenger door, waiting patiently. Dante looked at Isabella one last time. "You said earlier that the tequila wasn't why you were crying." She nodded. "Not anymore." For the first time in years, Dante allowed himself a genuine smile. It was small, almost invisible, but entirely real. He entered the SUV, and moments later the convoy disappeared into the quiet streets. Isabella stood on the sidewalk, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold. She had arrived at 2:15 a.m., believing she was invisible. She left knowing that her kindness, courage, and quiet strength had been seen by the one man everyone else feared. Across town, inside the moving SUV, Dante looked out the window as the encrypted message replayed in his thoughts. His enemies believed compassion had become his weakness. They were wrong. Compassion had revealed the betrayal hiding in plain sight, exposed a conspiracy before it succeeded, and introduced him to a woman who had reminded him that strength was measured not only by power, but by the people one chose to protect. Their paths had crossed because of darkness, but neither of them would leave that night unchanged. One found hope when she thought she had lost it forever. The other rediscovered the part of himself he believed had disappeared years ago. And somewhere beyond the city lights, the people responsible for the attack were already preparing their next move, unaware that they had awakened something far more dangerous than revenge. They had given the Mafia Boss someone worth protecting. If you had witnessed that moment inside the lounge, would you have walked away like everyone else? Or would you have defended Isabella before Dante ever stood up? Share your answer in the comments, and if you enjoy emotional Mafia Boss stories filled with suspense, loyalty, and unforgettable romance, don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next story.